There is a name that made French knights lower their eyes and English soldiers raise their swords. A name that spread across battlefields like fire across dry wheat. They called him the Black Prince, and for nearly 3 decades, he was the most feared warrior in the Western world. But this is not simply a story about one man. This is the story of a war that lasted longer than any living person could remember. A war that would reshape 2 kingdoms, drown a continent in blood, and produce one of the greatest military commanders who ever lived. This is the story of the 100 Years' War. The year is 1337. King Edward III of England sits on his throne, and he is furious. For decades, English kings had held territory in France, Gascony, Aquitaine, rich lands that made the English crown wealthy and powerful. But the French king, Philip VI, had seized those territories. And Edward III did not take humiliation quietly. Edward made a bold, almost reckless declaration. He claimed he was the rightful king of France. His mother was a French princess. The blood was there. The argument was real enough. And with that claim, he lit a fire that would burn for 116 years. What history would call the 100 Years' War was not one war. It was a series of brutal campaigns, cold pauses, and savage resurgences, stretching from 1337 all the way to 1453. France and England locked in a struggle over land, pride, and the right to wear a crown. But before any of that could matter, England needed a weapon. And in 1330, that weapon was born. Edward of Woodstock, first son of King Edward III and Queen Philippa of Hainault. Born on the 15th of June, 1330, inside the walls of Woodstock Palace in Oxfordshire, England. From the moment he could walk, he was being prepared for one purpose: war. By the age of 7, he was given his own household staff, a sign of immense royal status. By 12, he was studying military strategy alongside his father's most experienced commanders. By 15, he had been named Prince of Wales, the highest title the English crown could bestow on an heir. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the kind of natural authority that did not need to announce itself. Men followed him, not because they were ordered to, but because standing next to him made them feel they could not lose. Where the name Black Prince came from is still debated. Some historians point to his black armor, polished and stark against the color of battle. Others believe it was a name given by his French enemies, said in fear before it was ever said in admiration. Whatever its origin, the name stuck, and the man who wore it would earn it completely. August 26, 1346, northern France. A village called Cressy. Edward III had marched a massive English army through Normandy, burning and raiding as they went. The French king Philip VI had enough. He gathered an army that outnumbered the English by a staggering margin, some estimates putting French forces at nearly 30,000 men against England's 12,000. Edward III positioned his troops carefully on a ridge. He divided his forces into 3 divisions. The first division, the vanguard, the most dangerous position on any medieval battlefield, he gave to his 16-year-old son. 16 years old. The French cavalry charged with the confidence of men who believed numbers decided everything. What they rode into was a wall of English and Welsh longbowmen. Arrow after arrow tore through the French formations. Horses collapsed. Knights fell into the mud, still in full armor, unable to rise. At one point, the young prince's division came under such fierce pressure that his commanders sent a desperate message to King Edward III requesting immediate reinforcement. Edward sent back a message that has echoed through history ever since. He said his son was not yet in such desperate need. Let the boy win his spurs. Edward of Woodstock held his ground. The French charged 15 times. 15 times they were broken. By morning, the field at Cressy was covered in the bodies of French nobility. The English had lost fewer than 300 men. The Black Prince had not just survived his first battle, he had won it. 10 years later, the Black Prince was back in France. He was leading a chevauchée, a large-scale raiding campaign designed to burn French farmland, destroy resources, and break the morale of the French crown. Near the city of Poitiers, the French King John II cornered him. The English were exhausted. They were outnumbered. They were deep inside enemy territory, with no clear escape route. John II had an army of roughly 16,000 men. The Black Prince had fewer than 8,000. By every logical calculation, the English should have been destroyed. Instead, on September 19, 1356, Edward of Woodstock executed one of the most brilliant tactical maneuvers in medieval military history. He positioned his archers behind hedges and on high ground. He let the French advance uphill through narrow terrain, reducing their numerical advantage to almost nothing. The longbowmen opened fire at devastating range. French knights dismounted to avoid the arrows and tried to advance on foot, exhausted in full-plate armor. When the moment was exactly right, the Black Prince launched a counterattack that nobody on the French side expected. The French line collapsed, and King John II of France, the reigning monarch of the most powerful kingdom in Europe, was captured, taken prisoner on a battlefield by a man not yet 30 years old. The Black Prince did not humiliate his royal prisoner. That evening, he served King John dinner personally, waited on him at table, and refused to sit in the king's presence. It was a gesture of chivalry so calculated and so complete that it became legendary across Europe. John II was eventually ransomed for 3 million gold crowns, the equivalent of an entire national treasury. After Poitiers, the Black Prince was appointed ruler of Aquitaine. He governed from Bordeaux. He was, in every practical sense, the most powerful military figure in Western Europe. But power invites its own destruction. In 1367, he led a campaign into Spain to restore the deposed King Pedro of Castile to his throne. He won the battle at Nájera decisively, but the campaign devastated him. The climate was brutal. Supply lines failed. Disease moved through his army like a second enemy. The Black Prince returned from Spain a sick man. He would never fully recover. Back in Aquitaine, his methods of governance grew increasingly harsh. He imposed heavy taxes to pay for his campaigns. His subjects, French nobles who had grudgingly accepted English rule, began to revolt. The French king Charles V seized the opportunity and encouraged their rebellion. The prince, who had seemed invincible, was now fighting a war of administration instead of a war of arms, and administration was a battlefield he was losing. In 1371, gravely ill and unable to govern effectively, he returned to England. Edward of Woodstock never became king. On June 8, 1376, one day before the anniversary of his own birth, he died at Westminster Palace. He was 45 years old. He had outlived his greatest victories. He had watched the territories he bled for slip back into French hands. He died knowing the war was not won. His father, King Edward III, died the following year, never having seen the empire he imagined. The war would continue without both of them. The 100 Years' War finally ended in 1453, when France drove the last English forces from French soil, retaining only the port of Calais. England had lost almost everything it fought for. But the Black Prince did not become a legend because of what England ultimately won or lost. He became a legend because of how he fought. At Cressy, at Poitiers, on fields where the numbers never favoured him and the odds meant nothing to him. He was buried at Canterbury Cathedral, as he requested, in full armour. His tomb still stands. His gauntlets, his helmet, his shield hang above him exactly as he specified in his will. A warrior who knew that how a man died mattered as much as how he lived. The 100 Years' War made France a nation. It broke the old feudal world of Europe and planted the seeds of something new. And somewhere at the centre of it all stood a prince in black armour on a hillside at Cressy, 16 years old, holding a line that no one believed he could hold. He held it.